Welcome. It's our second panel discussion of the day, and we're talking Paris menswear, and we're going to be talking about the Givenchy show today. And I've got an exceptional set of panellists with me who I will let introduce themselves, if you don't mind.
Sure, I'm Mimma Butchart. I'm a fashion historian and a lecturer at London College of Fashion.
I'm Alex Fiori. I'm the editor of Love magazine.
I'm Rob Phillips, and I'm the creative director of the London College of Fashion for the School of Design and Technology.
And I'm Mimma Viglezio, and I'm a consultant.
So we've got a really nice mix here, which I always think is really great when you have people attacking things from a business perspective and then through to a historical one. I want to start by talking a little bit quite broadly about menswear, because obviously we've had the London shows, we've had Milan, and we're now sort of getting into the swing of the Paris shows. What have you guys found exciting? What do you think's been kind of some of the most poignant moments of the men's season so far? Alex.
I liked J.W. Anderson a great deal. I liked that I spoke with him about the collection, and I was trying to quantify what he did, things as tunics and things as kilts, and he was very definitive in stating that it was a dress and it was a skirt, and it felt that it was trying to challenge those conventions of menswear, but at the same time I don't think it looked challenging in a way that people wouldn't wear it necessarily. There was a lot there that could easily be distilled into the wardrobe of his customer, who's quite fashion forward anyway. I was also very interested in the way that what Miuccia Prada did synced up with what Raf Simons did in Paris. I thought that was, there's a lot of, I mean, you do see that because you see people that rip off Miuccia Prada the week after she's done it, because that's how influential she is. But to see them both look at menswear and sort of deconstruct it from these kind of total looks that we've been seeing for seasons, and really go back to the idea of a wardrobe, both of them consciously referencing their own history. Raf titled it after one of his old collections. I thought that was very, very interesting, and especially with, I'm very interested in what Raf's doing at the moment, just because of the rhythm of what he's doing at Dior. He did his pre-collection for Dior on the 14th. He showed his menswear on the 16th, and he showed his haute couture on the 21st. I know that people have buckled under that pressure, but it seems to be sort of thrashing some of the best work that he's done out of him. So that's what I'm finding interesting at the moment.
I'm intrigued by what you said then about this idea of distilling menswear back to these kind of key pieces and trying to push menswear a bit. And obviously you cited J.W. Anderson, who's been getting a lot of airtime on these broadcasts well after London, because it was such an interesting collection. But this is what we were talking about just before the stream started, this idea of what men are buying and what men are identifying with. And is it these luxury pieces, or is it things that push menswear a little bit? Is it things that are kind of questioning the boundaries of what men can and should be wearing? And have you seen the shows in a different way? Have you not looked at someone like J.W. Anderson? Are you more interested in the kind of the pieces that are selling? What do you think is driving the market?
Well, of course, I mean, working more on the business side, I'm interested in seeing things that are realistically wearable, but I also believe that if you do a fashion show, you need some creativity, otherwise it's just boring and it's, okay, just put it in your windows. The fact that men's fashion is growing incredibly fast right now, and it's taking over a lot of the market, I think it showed, especially in Milan, and maybe it's because Milan, it's always been probably the most classic part of the fashion, and apart from a few, creative hints a la Versace, it's been quite interesting to see how incredibly luxurious and wearable the fashion was. Then you see the clothes from clothes, and it's the techniques, the materials, everybody's fighting in finding new techniques and showing how you can work on fabrics in a different way. But the styling and the looks were very actually wearable. And I totally agree with you on the Prada show. Was absolutely incredible, in its simplicity, and I think it's just perfection.
And that idea of, with the Prada show, going to key pieces, so like the perfect jumper, the perfect shirt, the perfect shoe. Do you say that's how men are dressing? Do they want to buy a key piece, or are they interested in this in this thing that we've got in women's wear, which is, you know, shopping the look? Or are we ever going to have that in men?
I think it is about shopping. I don't know, I find men shop in a really classical way, don't they? They find it very hard to break away from a certain tradition of menswear. I think even I would, in some cases, find it. And I wear quite a lot of what would be classified as maybe not so average or acceptable states of dress, but maybe it's always the way I've worn clothes. But I notice with guys now, if you look at the masses, there's nothing particularly challenging. So I think it's quite clever for designers to really focus on key wardrobe items at a high price level to get a bigger investment from a mass audience. I think it's quite a clever move for a brand.
Yeah, I agree.
The more outrageous you are, whether it be for statement purposes or whatever it is, of course, the more you may actually put off a mass customer. And maybe in these economic times, we're looking for buy-in from a lot of people.
Sorry, do you mean mass by the quantity of people or mass just by the level of spending?
Fashion's becoming more and more interesting on a mass level, isn't it? When you think for everybody, it's becoming much more democratic, and people are more willing to invest and spend a lot of money on an item which maybe they think this is going to have quite a lot of longevity, and I feel good in it, I feel whatever that might be. Whereas something like J.W. Anderson, to the average Joe, that's going to be incredibly challenging to even get over the initial idea of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that he specifically defines it as skirts and dresses, like you said. Like, do you think, because that's something that Riccardo Tisci at Givenchy that we're about to see is kind of known for as well, like men in skirts. Do you think it's something that could ever catch on?
I mean, I'm interested in the discussion we've been having so far, and it was something that I raised, or that came to my mind in the Prada discussion, and that I've been thinking about ever since, which is how we separate between clothes and fashion, and if you define those as two different things. It was weird when you were just talking, then you were talking about, you know, the luxury and things that we wear, and then with J.W. Anderson, you know, the image of it might be enough to stop, but it's almost like it's made to function as that image. The fashion is that total look. And he himself, I went to see him in his studio before he showed it, and he had the show looks edited, and then there was another rail, and he was like, and this is, you know, this is what's not going in the show, but we're offering it for sales, and he's like, and this looks like a rail itself, which is, he said, you know, you can tell that I worked in a retail environment because that's what this is. This is the retail, and this is the fashion. And I'm interested, I think particularly menswear, there's that divide, and sometimes there is that idea where you go to a show and you see this fashion show, and then you see the retail kind of version of that, which bears, you know, varying degrees of resemblance to what you saw on the catwalk.
Do you think that clothes and fashion are always going to be more, because I'm glad you made that distinction, but do you think that's always going to be more married in menswear than it is in women's? Because I think in women's there's a sense that clothes can be fashion and ultra creative, and women are naturally more accepting of that. But there is this perhaps unfair kind of idea that men's fashion is always going to be more conservative, it's always got more natural codes.
And you feel the unfairness.
I think that's what's
growing
changing.
up you feel this unfairness.
I think that's exactly, you just nailed it, that's what's changing, and hence the shows this season were very different in that sense. But can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
So it's very clear, the distinction between clothes and fashion, but what's the meaning of fashion if it's not translated into clothes? Because at the end of the day, it's not only an art, it's also a commerce, or it's also something that people need to get out of their houses. So, and it's not, I don't have a bias here, I mean, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, dresses for men, as much as it was quite beautiful to see, I still don't really understand.
And also, if there is such a disjunction between what's on the catwalk and then what's actually offered for sale, that seems like kind of a...
But so what's the use of the fashion show? Because at the end of the day, in fashion shows you have a lot of bias.
To you as if you are.
I just would like to understand, because I like it personally, but you know, as someone who follows fashion also
it's
in a
interesting
creative
talking
way.
about that with haute couture coming up, which is the ultimate idea of clothes that are bought by you know, between 100 and 1,000 women in the world, and who are all dying. And then, you know, in Givenchy aren't showing an haute couture collection. They're going to make these kind of sample dresses for actresses, but they're not presenting them as a collection. And so I think there is that very interesting debate about clothing versus fashion and the function. I wonder, without getting too sort of heavy, if there is this whole postmodernist idea of an image becoming more real than its reality, and this idea that these clothes are made for image. I remember seeing a Prada show, and then when you saw the pictures of it on style.com, and a few people have talked about this as well, this idea that designers design in fours, because it's 4 rows of pictures on style.com, and J.W. Anderson designs in 3s. So the idea being you see these images repeated, and so people are thinking about them as 2-dimensional images. There was that Comme des Garçons show, which was all 2-dimensional, which seemed to be a comment on that. So I think sometimes there is, I do think what you were saying about menswear becoming less conservative is true. I think there's becoming more and more demand.
Fashion conscious.
As fashion becomes more democratic, people are more aware of fashion. They know that this wasn't all that was in that show. They know this isn't all that designer did, and they're demanding those more extreme pieces and are willing to pay more money, so people are willing to produce them now.
Yeah, but probably that also translates into a beautiful cashmere coat with shaved mink linen.
Yeah.
That's for me is the state. I mean, coats, overcoats, where really the protagonist, at least in Milan. But I mean, so you know, it goes higher than democratic, because that coat will probably cost £5,000. I don't know. I mean, but that for me makes sense. It's just telling me men are becoming more demanding. They want to stand out in the luxury and in the design and in the styling, whatever. But when we see Miuccia Prada doing something that it's more for the show than for the clothes or the store, but then she still is one of the greatest trendsetters. I mean, in her show, she always have hints of stuff that, as you said, people will rip off, copy, and you know, and like others that we're not mentioning here now, but dresses for men, skirts and tops for men, you know.
But it's not
will
not
it
new,
become,
is it?
What will it do to fashion?
I remember in the 90s growing up, and the whole thing about image, and I was someone, I couldn't afford fashion. I was obsessed with Jean-Paul Gaultier in like every single sense of the word. I wanted to buy everything he did. I couldn't afford this, so I go to Camden. It's where I got I got into fashion, so I could make the clothes myself and copy what he did. Skirts, piercings, we loved it. I mean, in Plymouth, I think I nearly got beaten up about 400 times because of the way I looked. But you did it because you loved that image. So even the image that may not resonate for sales will certainly inspire a huge generation of people now who will re-enter that industry and carry on perpetuating the image. I teach like 9,000 of them who all dress in a particularly amazing, almost theatrical way on a daily basis. I mean, it's kind of the luxury of being in a college and working with students who cannot afford half of this stuff. They create it. So to them, this is normality. J.W. Anderson, a lot of them felt, well, it's about time we saw this. It's great. We wear this. We dress like this. So it makes me wonder, is that who he's talking to? Is that, or is he of that generation? Or
it's cynical, but there's almost the idea that the show is, it is about a brand image, and I wouldn't say it's just like an extended PR exercise, but it is this idea that the show is this chance to put out something whimsical and fantastical. And I think it's very telling that we're talking about this in relation to Givenchy as well, because that's something that's been done so well with the couture. And you know, I think every fashion student in the country probably had that couture shot as their screensaver.
I get sick of seeing it
exactly.
over and over again.
And that, it is the image that is the brand. And you know, it's not really about the clothes, it's about what you've put across in this like kind of grail that is your show. And do you think that that's something that we're going to start to see more in menswear, is this idea of that, the show is something fantastical and dreamlike that actually says more about your brand than it does about what you're going to be putting on the rack?
I think it says quite a lot about a certain consumer that you're after. I think Eddie Slimane at Dior, when he was there, did this perfectly. He spoke to a specific person, and those people believed in him. and went to buy his clothes religiously.
Yeah.
I knew half of them. Do you know what I mean? That would just would only buy Dior because they really felt that said something about them. It wasn't a jock anymore. They didn't have to be some pumped up muscle boy.
Yeah.
This was a new. I think that's quite
What were
prevalent
they
when
connecting
brands
with, though?
connect to that audience.
Were they connecting with the individual pieces, or were they connecting with the
brand.
vibe of the show?
The
or
brand.
I think it's everything.
The
Brand.
An attitude.
I think mid long term, it's a as you say for Givenchy or Balenciaga, or I mean or Hedi at Dior Homme. Sorry, it's a whole. But I think you said something very important. It's going now from a focus on the product to a focus on the brand in menswear as well. And so the big men's companies, a la Canali, Zegna, Brioni, who are hiring, famous designer, venturing from shoes to clothes, doing things in that direction, because otherwise they will miss the train of all those men that are now fashion conscious, wanting to buy their product. Their products are fantastic, but their brand is less, recognized for fashion. And now they need to do something in that direction. I don't know if you agree.
I mean, there is, but I think as well, linking with what you were talking about with luxury, I think the thing that we've not talked about is China and the influence that that China entering into the luxury goods market over the last few years has had, which is this idea that menswear is growing faster than women's wear because men far outnumber women in China. And they're the people that have the money, and they're the people that are actually buying the clothes in China. Zegna is the best-selling men's brand in China, and Armani is the best-selling women's brand, and their taste is very conservative, which runs counter to my love of J.W. Anderson's dresses and skirts and frilled culottes. It's in
they will
China,
probably not sell much in China.
That ain't even getting in through customs,
Yes, exactly.
It's about those classic suits. It is about, and it is, like you were saying, it's about these incredible luxurious details, which to me, a lot of the Milanese collections, and it was interesting that a lot of them tapped into that English heritage, which of course the Chinese, these moneyed luxury goods consumers will recognise as kind of being the foundations of menswear, and it also means they can do very traditional tailored suits in amazing fabrics that they can sell a lot of, which I felt was, even in Versace, there were those suits at the start, which I couldn't help but think if you stripped away the styling, they would actually sell. I mean, it's to the louder, brasher.
3/4 looks,
so I think that's sort of, and also I think as well, when we're talking about brand images, it's not necessarily about the avant-garde stuff that we're going to see in Paris, and the brand image of Prada is incredibly different to the brand image of most of the rest of Milan, and that is it's luxury. It's about this, it's about if you want a £60,000 crocodile coat, this is the place to get it, as opposed to their £60,000, or theirs. It's not, in Milan, luxury is the sort of, luxury is the standard almost, and it's that idea of pushing it and trying to do it in an interesting way that I always think about, kind of techno geeks, and that idea of men who will buy another remote control because it does something fancy, and it's almost like the fashion equivalent of that. It's a coat that has this little pocket different and the lining's slightly different, and there are these details that are slightly different, and that is enough to motivate you to buy. And that's much more evident, I think, in Milan than it is in London or in Paris.
Completely. I accept that Vuitton was a little bit on the Milanese side this time. Don't you think so? It could have been showing
I was interested
between
with the
Prada and Gucci, I think.
I did like, there was a lot of stuff in the details, I think, with the Jake and Dina's Chapman prints.
That was there.
That print.
Did you see the mummified teddy bear slippers?
No.
They're like teddy bears,
that.
dead teddy bear slippers. Someone took a picture at a Risi. I don't think it was sort of, but so there were some quite kind of interesting details there, I think. But it did sync up with that idea. But then again, Vuitton again is a, incredibly, it's a house that feels much more built on luxury, I think, and not necessarily on fashion, I guess.
I agree.
So where does a house like Givenchy sit amongst this? Because obviously you've got that kind of fashion element that we've talked about, you've got that interesting design element, you've got that like young kids love it, you know, young fashion students, it is one of the cool brands that, you know, people are inspired by, but it also, there is this luxury element. Where would you say that Givenchy sits? What's its position in menswear? Is it doing menswear right?
I honestly can't answer. I don't
It's a
know
tough
enough.
question.
I need to see it
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
No, it's not a tough question. It's a very clear question. I don't want to say things that I don't know, so I'll give it to you. I don't know where Givenchy sits for men, honestly.
I mean, it was weird when we mentioned Dior Homme and Balenciaga, because they are menswear businesses that grew out of women's wear businesses.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And grew out of women's wear couture businesses, and very much what Eddie always talked about at Dior Homme was this idea of translating that couture, that Dior couture vision into a menswear equivalent, so based it on the sort of hand-tailored suit and a lot of the sort of details that he plucked from the couture. And I think it's interesting that Riccardo Tisci at Givenchy seems to have done a similar thing. You know, using last season there were the kind of the organza panels and chiffon, there's satin kind of syncing up his menswear and his women's wear. I mean, there were women in the show. It's that idea of syncing up a house that is very feminine and has always had that incredible feminine history, and trying to translate that into a sort of a masculine voice. I think that's the very interesting thing that he's done, because he's not really been doing menswear at Givenchy for a long time. It was Oswald Boateng before him, where it was built on the tailored suit, and which wasn't terribly successful.
But has Oswald Boateng been there during Riccardo's tenure at women's?
Yeah,
or he left before?
Riccardo did the women's, and then Oswald was doing the men's. And
for
then
like 2 seasons.
Exactly,
right?
it was for quite a short period.
And then
of time.
Riccardo took over the men as well.
But there is a confidence, I think, to what he's doing. When you say, even just the confidence to say, I'm going to bring across my women's into my men's, that takes some punch as a designer to, you know, to... I think the strongest designers are the ones that know what to take forward, you know, they're not scared to push an idea that they believe in. And I think that's something that's really great. Should we have a look at the collection? So we've got the opening look here, which is... We've just been talking about whether he's doing tailoring or whether he's doing something a bit more exciting, but should we flick through a couple of looks just to have a... just to get it?
I think tailoring can be exciting. What Hedy did at Dior, it was suits that were so exciting.
So we'll flick through a couple of looks.
This is a detail that he had in his pre-collection, wasn't it?
Can we
Women's
get
wear.
back to the fourth look?
Things tied round, but potentially integrated into the actual garment. Is that correct? Or is that just tied around?
That looks like it is. I think that's the styling. That looks like it's
So when I was
Is it
looking
a bag?
When I was looking at his women's wear range, with the pre-collection there to
Yeah.
the collection that will come in February or whenever it is, it was really similar.
It's interesting as well that he's one of the few designers to present a full pre-collection for men as well. And to, I mean, a lot of people do a pre-buy for shops, but he's one of the few that gives it its own creative identity, particularly because he showed it about 2 weeks ago. You know, it's such a short season for them to do that. And I think you're right, there is a bit of carryover from that women's and also from the men's.
But do you think it's a good thing that designers feel like?
I remember. I remember seeing those pictures. Was the photography in some sort of like a garage or something? Yeah. And some dude in the background working while the I love that.
We are getting that idea of the theatre as well with that set. You know, we've talked about presenting things in this beautiful.
Those candles.
Yeah. And there's always something so kind of wonderfully like religious and spiritual.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's bringing the real sort of Catholic element into it, isn't it? Even into the set itself.
There's that kind of Catholic opulence to what he does, which I really like.
Yeah.
So what are our gut reactions so far from what we've seen? We can keep looking through the imagery.
It's a lot of black.
Yeah.
Which makes it quite difficult to see, doesn't it? Actually.
It's strange in response to like his last menswear, which is a bit spring-summer collection. I don't feel quite as excited so far with the first silhouettes. I don't know why it doesn't feel like it has that punch.
It's very austere. I think it's
Yeah,
quite
there is-
elegant though. I love those shoes that are coming back again
the
and
shoes
again. And I sort of like that trend of closed shirt up to the last bottom, like
it's quite
starting
austere,
in
isn't
women
it?
in
There's a
it.
stiff-
Yeah.
It almost has a kind of Soviet kind of totalitarian kind of feel to it, with the grey buttoned up really high.
I think that's interesting though, because there is also like there's an element of sex to what he does, you know, even if it is this kind of austere Catholic kind of sexuality, there is always something a little bit
Is
romantic and
are those
sensual.
photographs on the knitwear?
Yeah, it looks like
And
a
we've
printed
seen-
photograph. There's been a few, haven't there? I can't see what it is because
This is something he's been playing with for a while,
Yeah,
though, isn't it?
that
The
last-
sort of the placement of
last
a very
season.
defined placement of a photograph, especially with the rectangle on sweatshirts or whatever it be.
But looking at this, as much as we're saying that the kind of the silhouette is not quite as punchy or it doesn't have as much bite as we've seen before, something like that perfect sweater, which you know will translate really well into people's wardrobes, it's something people are doing and has been really popular. It's interesting to see.
We've seen lots of knitwear everywhere, right? Overcoats and sweater and...
It's kind of that clothes versus fashion thing again.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I should probably quantify when I said that, because I would include Prada and Raf as clothes rather than fashion. This season, it felt like they were proposing wardrobes rather than shows.
Probably
is
Prada
that an
or Raf.
economy thing, or is that what's that?
I think so.
I just think it's after seasons of very extreme fashionable looks, all of a sudden a man dressed in a coat and a shirt and a pair of trousers and a pair of shoes looks very sort of, you
But
know,
doesn't that bring it back to fashion?
it's quite
then?
arresting.
But you know,
Because if it's not
You know,
making a statement, then it's fashion.
I also
suppose.
think that since these people have to look at the figures as well. And I know you hate me for saying this, but this is the
No.
reality. And looking at the figures today, they're going up. Men are coming more and more into their stores and asking for fashionable things, and they buy, instead of a coat every 20 years, they probably buy 2 in a season. And you know, and Mr. Porter probably helped all this phenomenon. And so they're not stupid, you know, they create fashion because they're Miuccia Prada or Raf Simons, but they also want to sell those looks. So I'm convinced that there is a commercial reasoning behind the fact that they went more clothes than fashion.
But they also,
Convinced.
like, they were commercial in terms of the pieces, but I mean, what I really liked about those 2 collections in particular was the real kind of shocks of colour that they had through them as well. I mean, so I mean, they were definitely commercial, but they weren't kind of an incredibly traditional menswear look that has a kind of, you know, bland palette or very dark palette. They had those kind of shocks coming through, which I really liked.
It felt like it didn't. I think it didn't feel commercial in the sense of it felt like it was just kind of traditional menswear. It felt like it was responding to the way in which like everyday men dress, and I think that was quite new. Like, I agree with you in the sense it was clothes, but I also think there was an element of fashion. You're sending out
Of course,
a model
the
that
styling
looks like
and
a
also the
teenage
setting
boy.
and yeah. But then all those pieces separately, most of the people can buy. And don't forget that Prada has been traditionally, and maybe you're a little bit too young to remember that, Prada was #1 men's fashion in Italy. We're talking 15, 20 years ago. All the Italian white collar and suit men were buying a suit at Prada. I mean, all the people in advertising, but you know, the businessmen, not the creative director, they were all in Prada, and so Prada is probably taking back that you know, that tradition that they have. They were very, very strong in men's.
I was going to say, I think there's also that argument that fashion, the newness of fashion is only actually new in contrast to what's just preceded it. So the idea of Prada coming off, for instance, last autumn winter, which was, again, it was suits and it was coats, but it was this incredibly theatrical. It was about the theatricality of male dress, and this felt like it's the opposite, and it's also very different to that spring one, which was so colour blocked and quite strict, and in its own way could be seen as quite difficult to wear. I think you dissect it down into pieces, but there is that idea of, it's almost like, to contradict myself, this idea of them actually taking the idea of clothing and making that into fashion. The idea that it's not fashion becomes fashion. If that's not too sort of that's not actually going to melt my brain trying to unravel.
It felt like a statement. It wasn't just ordinary clothes. It was clothes as fashion, as you say. But
and Miuccia is probably the one who can afford to do that because it's important, whatever she does. So.
Is it harder for someone like Riccardo? I know he's very established, he's been around a long time, he's incredibly respected, but you don't immediately have the kind of the ear of the fashion crowd in the way that someone like Miuccia does. You know, we always give her collections that little bit more time, that little bit more scrutiny, that little bit more consideration. You know, people, you wouldn't be off the cuff about a Prada show. Everyone goes away and thinks about it. When we were talking about this, because we just had our Comme des Garçons panel discussion, and we all said that is that thing where people are almost afraid to dislike it because it means you don't get it.
Oh, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Don't quite award that courtesy to a younger designer, or because it's much easier to say you don't like it because they're not on that pedestal in the way that someone like Prada is.
But I don't think anyone else is really on that pedestal at the moment other than Miuccia Prada. I think she's kind of a force unto herself in that respect, in terms of her influence within the industry and within fashion media. It's kind of like there's Miuccia and then there's everyone else, I think, in that respect.
I quite agree with you. I'm thinking while you're speaking, but I do think that she's quite lonely up there right now.
Should we see some more lips of the...
I do like this. I don't know why exactly, because I haven't seen many different things, but it's quite chic, if that matters. It's very black though. There's nothing else than black.
Let's see another lip. There's a clear kind of commercial bent to that. You know, those are beautiful coats, but they look like they're so relevant.
I'm interested to know the sort of creative idea behind it, sort of the justification. Last season was very self-evident, I thought. You know, you saw it, you got it, it was placement print, it was Madonna and Child, it was religious, and you know, it spoke very clearly.
I'd really like to know what's on those prints as well. Can't quite see it.
Yeah, I don't see. Is there what? It's like a character on the picture. I really don't see it.
It doesn't look like it's the religious thing that we've seen before, but do you think it's quite a statement for someone to do something that is so black? Do you think that'll...
It's a little bit, I think I've seen this 3 times already, but maybe... Do you see what I mean?
It feels...
Yeah,
it
feels quite repetitive.
Yeah.
No, it feels...
Well, we just said that.
And then there's a bit of leg.
Yeah.
We've seen some arms at the beginning.
So this is that kind of, I love it because there's a primness to it, but then there's also that sexual element. You know, it's quite, it reminds me of the J.W. Anderson show in the sense of what I loved about it was there was that kind of prim British stiff upper lip, but then there was also that real kind of quite quirky like sexual element to the clothing.
I mean, that's Saskia. The interesting thing as well is that that's a woman.
What do you guys think of when we see women on the menswear catwalks?
Well, Riccardo is probably one of those that have done it. I've played with the ambiguity. The most Hedy has done it a long time ago. His first campaign was incredible for that, but I'm used to see this with tissue. It doesn't surprise me anymore in a way.
I think he does it quite successfully.
Yeah.
I mean, for the flip side, someone once said to me, a female fashion journalist who reviews the women's shows just said that she closes her eyes if a boy comes out on a women's catwalk because as far as she's concerned it's not part of what she's talking about. And I do remember when Style.com, if there were men in the show, they wouldn't include the men in pictures of the men in the kind of the catwalk
do you not
imagery
think
because
as
it was a
fashion
separate
becomes more
thing.
androgynous, that's quite, I know it's something that has been done quite consistently in Givenchy, so perhaps it's not the best show to kind of frame that discussion for, but there is a sense of, by putting a woman on a menswear catwalk or a man on a women's wear catwalk, it's almost tying into this narrative of how clothes are becoming more androgynous and things can be swapped between, and maybe one day we'll see a catwalk where it is completely unisex and it's boy and then girl and boy and then girl. And do you think that is part of a statement, or is that
I mean, there's that, and on the cynical side, there's the idea that it's all in the shop together and it should talk, you know, it can't be completely different, that, you know, it should correspond with each other.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, the weird thing is you look at stuff from, kind of, you look at Tom Ford for Gucci 10 years ago and there wasn't necessarily that correlation between men's and women's, whereas today it's all quite slick and so, it's all quite kind of linked in a way that it will sit well together. So I'm interested if there are those kind of commercial considerations coming through in those ideas. And also just, it's, you know, if you're not going to show your pre-collection by itself, if you can sneak a few women's pre-collection pieces into the menswear show, it's a cost-effective way of getting them a global platform.
It's quite sad.
A lot of black.
Well, I would say only black.
I'm interested with that kind of the idea of just
I
tying
really want to
things
know
up
if
the
that's if that is just a style. It's a jacket been tied round, or is it cut like that?
Is
that
it cut,
That
after
looks like
seeing
a
the
styling
women's
thing.
wear pre-collection, and I'm thinking that it was because they looked cut into the silhouette. I'm sure they were. So I'm thinking, is he continuing on here?
I think that's.
And the imagery just now looks
it's
like
a jacket tied on your waist.
Is that a man or a woman?
Yeah, it looks like it's a
Someone
nude
covering their face.
man.
Is it a Linda Lempic? You know, the black and white version. What's the name of the painting? Famous with the green. Oh.
There's something quite sexy to the idea of, you know, how they were all buttoned up and very black and quite austere, and then it's this idea of removing this buttoned up coat and having a t-shirt with
bare arms.
Bare arms, but also a t-shirt with a nude person printed on it. And you can imagine in the look before that, whether that is cut or whether that's tied around the waist, if that had been, it's as if that's removed and then that's what's underneath, which is quite interesting, this idea of getting dressed.
It has also moved into kind of sportswear from very strict suiting at the start. And I kind of class a leather jacket as sportswear in that kind of 50s way.
I associate with Givenchy with menswear with sportswear. Sports looks very streetwise, more so I think for me than the tailoring. Maybe that's just because it's the images that resonate with me more after the show.
So is this what you were expecting to see? Or?
No, actually, yeah.
What were you?
I was waiting to see the skirt again.
Me too.
I've noticed. Well, there's the stars and the stripes. That's been before.
Yeah.
And then there's the mono version of that, the grayscale version.
I kind of built us all up for the
I wasn't quite expecting these jackets though. These sorts of almost barbarous.
Bell stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the.
There is I'm interested when you say the utilitarian, because there is that kind of uniform element to it, which is.
I was expecting skirts as well, and more ambiguity, you know, between men and women.
So, do you think the aim here has been something a bit more commercial? You know, do a really great jacket. That's something that will sell well.
No, it's like I don't know. I don't understand this.
It's interesting. Balenciaga did a collection that referenced Belstaff jackets.
Really?
Yeah, like 2001.
I don't know.
But that was about Jules Verne and kind of undersea and astronauts. So I'm not really helping with that.
Has someone seen a press release for this? Do we know what was his inspiration or what was
That would be helpful.
For this?
Yeah.
That's kind of.
I love this. I really want to see what the sweater jumper is made of. I love the last look with the guy with the beard. I don't know why. I always. It's that sort of image that will resonate with me more than.
But that's really macho, that isn't it? That there's that sense of kind of like a motorcyclist.
This
like
one too. They look like rugby
players.
players.
Yeah, it's like American football.
It's not what I expect from Tisci, but
still,
even
with the collection with the sweaters and the skirts and the sort of minotaur, whatever it was, the nose rings. I kind of associate him now with almost that sort of muscular macho guy. But
Yeah.
no,
It's kind of gladiatorial,
priest
the kind of
collar.
skirts he was doing there, wasn't it? Because they had a lot of pleating and stuff.
Yes.
So it was quite, like, yeah.
and the guys looked super sexy. You know, it worked.
Yeah.
But it's not sexy in the way that you get, you know, Versace sexy. There's still that kind
Is
of...
Versace sexy?
I think Versace's
To me, that doesn't
I
scream
Versace
sexy.
There's
Fair
a-
taste
high
and
cap.
There's a
unsexy.
sort of gothic
It was
element.
not
For me, it was
sexy to me.
killing
Yeah.
sexiness, but you know. it's
Versace
just-
sexy is in a league of its own.
Yeah, exactly. I disagree with you on this one. That's more sexy.
It is the shape of the guy's legs that's beautifully muscular, and I don't know. There's something really, something kind of sweaty about. I think there's something really sultry about that look. I like it. I
There's
think
a
I like
darkness
it.
to it, yeah.
What, is that a skull?
Yeah, I think that is
That
a
looks
skull.
like a
isn't it?
skull.
It looks like...
With a face or something juxtaposed behind the skull, it almost looked like it'd been faded out.
There is the gothic element. I know we talked about the candles before.
The candles on the catwalk
Yeah.
and all the black.
So Jenny Shimizu. It looks just like her. And the tattoos are all in the right place. Was that Jenny Shimizu?
It looked like.
When I look at menswear, it does make you think, and I think in a way that women's doesn't, is who is going to identify with these clothes? Like, who is the person that would wear that? Who would you say who's the Givenchy man? You're like, don't want to answer that.
See, I'm not sure I'm never sure about talking about a man or a woman for a particular brand, and particularly with menswear, I think it's so much about men would very rarely go and just buy everything from one brand. I think I don't think you get that.
They get stuck with the store that they really like and then they return.
I think they'll buy certain things
They
from
do.
certain brands.
They do. You,
But I
you
don't think
guys
they would
are
buy everything.
not any men. You're
But I think they would
fashion-oriented.
no. But it's things like I buy all my trousers from one place. At Dior, I used to buy all my shirts from Dior because I knew they fitted, and I would go in and buy 4 at one time because I'm going to need 4 shirts. I think that there's a lot of brand loyalty, but I wouldn't necessarily say a man would go and buy everything because, particularly with a brand like Givenchy, you could end up looking like a fashion victim if you wear it head to toe. But I think you're probably right in brands like kind of Canali or something like that. There are men that would go into there and just buy everything.
Only wear there. But and you wouldn't notice in the street. While here, if someone goes out like this, he's in a total look Givenchy. That's the difference, you know. So I think if I see this look, it's almost for everybody, you know. Anybody who can wear skinny trousers, so it's not too short and too fat. But you separate the things, and it's a beautiful pair of black trousers. You see what I mean? And then depending how you style it, I think there are more and more pieces that are for everybody in men's collection, no matter how fashionable they are, because these people need to sell or they get fired. I mean, we've seen examples recently.
It's true.
Totally unexpected people got thanked from brands, and you know.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Well, what's the point in having the show, doing the shoots, and putting them in a shop if no one's going to go in and whack out the dollar to buy it?
This is quite boring. I'm sorry. Sorry, Ricardo.
There are
but I'm
bits, aren't there, where you can't. But it's almost like I really want to see it
can't wait to
move,
see the
and I
last
want to hear the music and see this in the context of the
for
whole
sure.
story. It's difficult, isn't it? But there are some where you look at it and you just think.
And I think speed on the catwalk as well, how close the models are together and how quickly they come out can really affect how...
So what used to make old Helmut Lang shows so good was how he just sent out these armies, and then no one, then one, then like 5. It was...
It's like when you get the Armani pack of models.
And the 75 looks. At the end you're like, oh, can you please stop?
Well, I think Tishy last season was at 70 something, but it was because they sent them out about 3 seconds after each other.
Men's or women?
For menswear. I mean, it had some women mixed
really?
in, but it was just it was a long catwalk. They didn't turn around. They just went out.
Oh, they were like
and then it was.
So we're going to see 75 this time? No.
I was expecting something a bit more revolutionary somehow from this collection, I think.
Me too.
Based on the last few.
I mean, I think, but the interesting thing with the last one is it's when you actually looked at it, it felt like it was a wonderful statement, but it wasn't actually incredibly challenging in terms of the garments.
Yeah.
You know, it was a sleeveless top and trousers and then a panel of chiffon at the back, which could easily be removed, or you know, bomber jackets and ties and shirts that were all printed together and that had a great impact, but it was easy to see them kind of, you could easily imagine someone wanting to buy that. I wanted to buy that.
Yeah, I think it was, I found the print, like the idea behind the prints for the last collection I found quite interesting, which is maybe slightly unfair because I can't quite see what these are, but to be honest, they slightly look a bit like Athena posters at the moment.
I'm so pleased you just said that. I was thinking in a minute we're going to have a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Clutched in giant arms.
Do you think there's an element then with Givenchy where the excitement does come in those small, more decorative elements, you know, whether it is the amazing jewellery that they've done or whether it is, you know, a print of something really exciting, a motif on a jumper? Do you think that's where the intrigue comes from?
I mean, it's difficult to talk about it when we're looking at it on a screen. I think it's the way it's registering is very different. I think the last collection registered much more, it had more impact in images than this does, which isn't necessarily a judgment for or against it. But I think because my favourite Prada collection looks dreadful in pictures, but it's the one that I have all the clothes from. And I think that, but again, it was sort of that thing, I guess, what I was saying about fashion and clothes, but that idea of the image and the importance of the image.
It is true that some collections photograph better than others, and some collections you really need to see them in movement with them, you know, or touch the clothes, and probably this one is one of those.
Black venue is sort of
this one. I mean, I can see black and I can't see the shape even, you know, so it's quite difficult. But one thing I can see is that it's very repetitive. You know,
the only thing I don't feel like it's been repetitive about so far is he seems to be, as much as there's so much black, is I like the play of black texture. There's been so many so far. You've almost had to rubberize, to matte, to gloss, shine. He's obviously loving the black textures, but it doesn't. I don't think it helps us look at this. No. If that makes sense, no matter how much.
It's a little bit of a pity, though. Yeah.
We had an interesting conversation when we were just having.
There's
our
one suit, the first one. Sorry.
No, it's fine. We were talking when we were doing the com panel about black and black selling online, and it's quite interesting given that you're saying what collections translate well in imagery, and there is that sense of if you wouldn't buy a black top online because you can't see it.
Or white. Sometimes you don't see anything.
Should designers have to be led by that? Should they be? Is it healthy that they're being led by what their collection's going to look like online?
I think it should be a consideration.
Yeah.
I think I think for me, the clever designers are able to think that way. The way that Miuccia Prada thinks is you look at a collection and you know that she's thought about how this is going to look on style.com. I think there's a cleverness in that awareness of creating a product that people will want to buy, will photograph well.
But that's one thing. To be led by that means really killing creativity. You know, we don't want a fashion that it's led by how it's photographed. I mean,
you kind of want to consider
not
the
everybody's
purchase,
as clever as Miuccia Prada.
But I do think as well that people do have to consider the fact that whether it's online or in a magazine, it's likely that people's first interaction with what you've created is going to be an image of it. It's the age that we live in. With the last Comme des Garçons Autumn Winter women's show, that was two-dimensional. And for this one, I got into a very convoluted discussion about how it was actually about the fourth dimension, and the fourth dimension being getting inside a garment. And that's the clever thing. You want people to want to experience what it's like to be inside that garment, because then they're probably going to buy it. With Bottega Veneta, I was talking with someone and they would talk about their e-commerce. And when they looked at the volume of e-commerce coming from China, they opened 40 shops there because they feel like they should be going. You need to experience it physically, and that that people will buy more, and there'll be more brand loyalty if it's they might buy something different because when you're physically experiencing, and also I guess when you're in that environment that they can control and that they can really, it's sort of like a show. It's an extension of their brand image, I guess.
Yeah, Bottega Veneta would always be more a brick and mortar.
It's always tactile.
I mean, I was there when I was still with the Gucci group when it was starting to open in China. it's not really because of the volume that were coming from the e-commerce, because it took longer than for the other brands to work. You know, the leather is very expensive, so people spend less money online, and the clothing were quite new. But it is true what you say, that people now want to experience the fourth dimension, as you called it. And I think that's why also clothes are becoming a little bit like jewelry. You know, the high jewelry, you turn them around and they're as beautiful as in front, like the pattern of the Bulgari jewels that are amazing. And that's what's happening more and more. If you look at a coat from a distance, or if you touch it and then the lining or whatever happens inside, and I think that's exactly how you put it, the fourth dimension. I didn't think about that.
But I think as well what you were saying about jewellery, it's weird to talk about that, because I would never buy, I know you can because I've poured through the website, but I would never buy kind of a 20 grand Cartier ring online. Just would never consider it. But amazingly, people will buy a 20 grand dress online. I mean, Net-a-Porter do sell. I work with Mary Catranza, and Net-a-Porter buy her dresses and they sell them online. And I mean, I could never imagine buying a 20 grand dress.
No, but it's less than people that buy £400 item online. True. What you say about jewelry, usually people, they go, when they have 20 grand to spend, they go online and they decide more or less what they like. And also people like to go in a store and already know that what they're trying, how much it costs also, because at a certain level they think it's not very chic to ask for the price and then say gulp, you know. So they know already. So the website for high luxury in hard and soft, whatever you call it, it's more for that. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's more like a catalogue.
There is that element of seeing imagery, and you know, people that we don't get that influx of jewellery imagery online. So I think the natural sphere for jewellery is always going to be in a shop. Whereas fashion, it's what you were saying before about how people interact with fashion as an image.
But jewellery sells online at a different level. I mean, Ashley Clark is the proof.
I mean, it's high fashion all over the internet.
But also, let's face it, when you spend from 5 to 10 to 20. Sometimes you also like to be treated in a certain way because you're that client to spending. You know what I mean?
Why are people
and people like the experience still of being then offered a glass of champagne because they just signed a credit card for 20 grand.
Why have they become more acclimatized then to buying a 20 grand like Alexander McQueen dress, as you can buy on Net-a-Porter? Where's that distinction come from between like a 20 grand ring, as you were saying, or a 20 grand dress?
Sometimes you know how it fits you. I mean, sometimes when you spend that much money on a brand, it's because you like that brand and you know that brand looks good on you. So even at a different level, there are jeans that I know I can buy online because I know exactly my size, how they fit. You know, I know how McQueen looks on me, so I could buy online. Then some other things, sometimes you just don't want to resend it back because whatever it's. So, I mean, I think this is a non-discussion because people do buy online and they spend more and more, and I also think the level of spending grows, right?
Yeah, no, it's going
for jewelry is still a little bit different.
Would this draw you in online then, if you saw it?
Maybe the shoes.
The shoes?
I'm a sucker for shoes,
so they're quite good. The most interesting thing for me as well, I think.
So what's our takeaway from this collection going to be?
Have we finished it? Is that the last look?
That was the last look, yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. It's the last one we've got.
48.
Yeah, it feels like we've watched 5 or 10.
But that's what's weird about this collection. Maybe
the nicest thing for me are those huge sweaters with whatever the details were. It's really hard to see on here, but they kind of made an impact, and maybe that's in the context of them being in this huge crowd of black that they stood out. So maybe if I relook at them again later, I'm maybe not so keen. But it's kind of the only thing that. I can't believe we've looked at 45 looks.
But that says something.
Wow.
Any final thoughts from anyone on?
I mean, I'm interested to dissect it into. I always think there are certain collections where you go and you see it and you get it straight away, and I don't need to talk to anybody, and I can walk out and go and have a pizza, and I know what it is.
The Prada one, you're like, just don't even need to talk.
But even sometimes it's like you go and you're like, okay, right, so it's it's 40s, and but with some others you want to go and dissect it and find out what it is, and I think sometimes that will illuminate your view of the whole collection. I get a feeling that that is what this is going to be. All of a sudden when they'll give you a keyword and it will trigger, and all of a sudden it will just make total sense, and that's sort of what, I don't know if my takeaway, it's my, I need to go and get it, it's like my getaway.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, in theory it shouldn't really matter what his inspirations were and what he was thinking, you know, it should all kind of come through from just seeing the images. But I really agree, I think there needs to be some sort of anchorage in terms of, I'm really interested to find out what he was looking at, where he was taking influences from, and to look at that print in more detail as well, because it was really hard to see. So yeah, I think the takeaway is that we need to know more.
Yeah, but I'm sure that there is a reason why, you know, it looks like 5
I kind of almost don't want to know
but
more,
it's,
you know. I'm almost so unintrigued now. I'm so shocked, I really am. Especially maybe because you said it was 75 looks, and I thought, okay, well, any minute now we're going to really pick up, and it's really going to go.
It never did,
and it hasn't. And now I'm almost.
But
like,
there is a reason.
I'm almost not interested, and maybe it's because of the rest of the stuff. This like seeing Dries the other day, I just fell in love with that, all the textures, and I just loved it. I wanted to know more. I can't wait for it to hit the stores.
And this sort of
Calvin Klein, the fabrics, just I love that. It but this I'm almost like, oh.
Things have to work harder now though, don't they? With so much fashion to see, if something doesn't wow you immediately, then...
You kind of think, well, but there's going to be something else coming up.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful panel.
Thanks.